Hi, everyone, and welcome to this amazing panel that we have today, Confronting a Critical Challenge in HR Leadership and Personal Wellbeing. I am joined today by an amazing group of HR leaders, and I'm really excited to get right into the questions. Um, First off, folks, what strategies have you found to be the most effective in managing your own wellness and happiness while you're balancing the demands of, leadership, both for yourself, for your team, for your organization? And how do you ensure that, the emotional support of HR doesn't lead to any sort of stress or long-term burnout? Basically, that's a really long question to say, how are you managing your wellness and your mental health? Mandy, can I throw that to you first?
Sure, I'd love to kick it off here, and because it's something that is really important to me. I mean, we're going through a difficult time in our organization with losing some federal funding, and it's a really it's a terrible time for HR, for the whole organization, but also the people that are charged with having to make really tough decisions about what programs to end, what people to let go. And every conversation that I've been involved in with our HR team, I remind them we have our EAP. It's not just for the employees, it's for you too. We have resources available for all of us. It's not just for them. We need to, as we like to say, we need to put our own mask on first before we can help others, right? We need to be solid, and we have trauma that we're going through, and so that we need to make sure that we're addressing that and taking care of our own needs first, so that we can really be present in the office. We can't expect others to do the same if we're not taking our own advice. So I try to not just encourage them to use it. Also, I use it, right? I use our EAP. I have a therapist. I have my coping mechanisms. I do yoga. I tell them about my yoga practice and my meditation and the exercise that I do that helps keep my head screwed on straight. And leading by example, I think, is also really important in these times where, it almost feels like we're back in pandemic days with all of the changes that are happening so quickly, and you don't know what's coming, and what tomorrow's going to bring, and what the Supreme Court is going to say today versus what they said yesterday. So, you have to keep your head about you, and you have to be able to address the constant change with a clear head. And so being able to take time for yourself and make sure that you're allowing yourself time to grieve and to process and take care of that will really enable you to be a good leader. And that's what I've done, and I'm still here. So
Mandy, if I
I,
could maybe jump
yeah,
in,
go
piggyback on
ahead,
some of your comments, a
please.
couple of things that jumped out to me. I mean, one, I recognized in myself when you reference pandemic times, I think I broke into a cold sweat, right? Like there's trauma there that as an HR professional and then sort of being on the front line of leading through the pandemic, I don't know if we've all sort of gotten through that necessarily. But then you also commented on leading by example. And I think that's so important. I mean, whether we realize it or not, the leadership shadow that we each cast in our roles as leaders in the organizations, leaders of HR professionals, they're really watching, right? And they want to see, like, do you drink your own champagne? Do you follow the things that you preach? And so you kind of keeping it simple, like the one practice for me that I find most impactful and I think helps to set an example is boundaries. Like it's not
mm,
new, it's not innovative, but the idea of setting boundaries for yourself, whether that's, look, I just don't take calls after 5 p.m., 6 p.m. I don't take calls. I used to start getting calls scheduled for 6:30 in the morning. I'm like, no, I want to work out in the morning. Like I don't take a call till 8 a.m. That's just a hard and fast rule. I have a break for lunch. God forbid I have time to eat, right? Like just setting boundaries, being consistent and sticking with those, not only do they help my health, right? My wellness, my mental health, But then I think it also sends a really nice message to my team that these things they're acceptable and you should be doing them too.
I love the link back to the pandemic because there is a lot going on. It's emotionally charged, etc. And that concept about boundaries, we didn't really establish that back during the pandemic. We were just go, go, go. So we're learning and we're taking some of that with us. Christina, please. What are
Yeah,
your thoughts?
just very briefly piggybacking just very slightly on what Brian was saying, that not only is it acceptable, but it should be kind of almost required of ourselves, right? That we're saying to others through our examples that this is how you should treat yourself. This is how you should take care of yourself. That going for a walk at lunchtime or taking your lunch, even though you're busy, is something that we want you to do. We very much want you to value your own time that way.
Yeah, for sure. Christy, thoughts?
I agree with so much of what everyone is saying. And when I think back on, what else I've done, I think just an acknowledgement that it can be really lonely at the top, right? So, and we've all read those studies of, the significance and importance of having a friend at work, and the study, like Gallup, I think it was, that said a best friend at work, so find one. And in our work, that can be so difficult. So for me, one of those things I've done is, providing some separation from the institution that I work for because of those confidentiality concerns in HR, but finding those friendships and those networks through some association work. So for me, it's like an HR association, which then becomes my safe space where I can talk about things, even without names, but whether it's just to vent or to do a gut check or just brainstorm ideas, they're my people. They're my people when I can't talk about those things at my own institution with my other people. So for me, it's just finding those intentionality around finding those friendships and networks.
It's kind of like this community we have right now with Connects, right?
Exactly.
Wonderful. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question, and I invite any of you to jump in, but it really is about how our role as leaders in HR is to, drive organizational culture. When you're doing that, and that's a heavy lift for all of us, how are you working on your own personal growth and development? And what tips and tricks can you share with our audience today?
I would sort of, say to what Christy just said, right? Finding the right community, I think really matters, and to foster your own development. I go to conferences. I take development courses when the opportunity is there, but I find no more value than when I'm in moments like this with other professionals who know the lived experience of what it is to be a leader in the HR field, the struggles and all the joys that go with it, right? You get that validation that if it feels hard for you, it's okay. It feels hard for a lot of us, right? And so, those types of things. And then, of course, just supporting culture of the organization. It's important to show up. And if you're promoting a development program for your company, that you're viewed as an active participant as well. And not just for the sake of showing up, but that you are engaged in getting something out of it.
Yeah.
Brian, I couldn't agree more with everything you said. You've echoed my thoughts exactly.
Yeah, same. I think, when the work is, you're never done with work, right? There's never like okay, I finished everything I needed to do today, so I have some extra time to take a course. That doesn't happen. You have to make it a priority, right? You have to put it on the list and say, my personal growth, my participation in, outside organizations is important to me, and I'm going to, put that on my calendar and mark it down and attend, because otherwise, if you don't prioritize it, it's not going to happen.
It's the intentionality, right?
Yeah.
Really making it a focus.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
As something came up, Brian, as you were speaking, and as well, just in relation to the previous question about vulnerability as leaders and as HR leaders, how do you see leaders who are expressing more vulnerability, more authenticity, building out the culture within your organizations. What's your thoughts on tying in the two?
I mean, personally, I believe that vulnerability is the fastest avenue to trust. And if you want to build culture, you build trust. And so I think the two have a very strong link. And I think that that opportunity for people to realize it's okay to be vulnerable, right? And that they're supported in that, there's space for that, the strength of relationship that can be developed through that and drive culture in your organization, I think is incredible.
I agree. I think, we talk about psychological safety at work, and I think vulnerability is a surefire way to show people that they can be less than perfect too. And that, there's space for all of us here. And I think it makes you inherently much more approachable, much more relatable. And it's essential. And sometimes it can be very difficult for leaders to let their guard down in that way. But I completely agree. The fastest way to build relationships.
To that trust. Amazing.
Yeah, I would totally agree with what you all are saying. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go on to another question here. And this is, when we approach building leadership credibility and influence across the C-suite, especially where we're advocating for people-focused initiatives, I can say that 3 times fast. They may not immediately impact the bottom line. So in other words, how do we influence our C-suite to make sure that people are top of mind when we bring forward these initiatives to them, and helping them see that overall this is going to create long-term value?
I can jump in on that. If no one else, I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but I think it's extremely important to speak the language of the CEO and the CFO in terms of being able to correlate return on investment and the cost benefit analysis, and truly understanding your data, understanding the cost of high turnover if you don't do these people focused initiatives, or being able to tie it all back to whether it's dollars and cents, or it's the likelihood that we're going to have a thriving workplace, the likelihood that we're going to have more productive employees through employee satisfaction, or providing wellness initiatives and things like that, where over the course of the past 4 years, actually 5 years now, right? This month, that we've seen the drastic impact that mental health challenges can have on an organization, or an inability to come to work, or flexible work arrangements can help you or hinder you, and being able to tie that back to concrete data, really, to be able to show this is not a nice to have. This is not because I'm the empathetic one and I'm just going to give away the store, but this is how we get the best employees, how we keep the best employees, how we have the most innovative ideas, and really understanding the research on that, both internally and externally. That to me is kind of the best way to get ahead of those arguments in that. And also, showing that you truly understand where the CEO, where the CFO, where they're coming from in terms of their concerns and their needs for both the strategic direction of your organization and the financial concerns.
Yeah, Christina, adding on to that, I completely agree. I mean, where you can tie this to ROI and the financial implications, that's ideal. Where you necessarily can't, right? Sometimes it's a little bit harder to draw those out. I still think you're spot on in the idea of business acumen. Mm-hmm. And business acumen means that you can identify the ROI elements, but sometimes it also just means I understand the business that each of my C-suite peers are managing, which means I know their priorities, I know where they're struggling, and if I can tap into that as an avenue where my proposal will help drive those outcomes for them, right? And I can influence that's where I can find a lot of success in building credibility and getting support. And, I think they say it a lot on the legal side. You never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. I think that's very true in the HR world as well. So for me, stakeholder management is key for credibility building. I meet one-on-one with the C-suite members. I talk to them about their initiatives. I share with them what I might be proposing or thinking about and invite them to that conversation. And then I know when I walk into our executive meetings, if I'm going to propose something, I already know if I won. I already know if I have the answer I want because I built that coalition of support well before I ever walked in the room.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Brian, Christine, I agree with everything you said. And the thing that came to mind in addition to that was, really in that business acumen and knowing those stakeholder groups is the art of storytelling, right? It's really tying into those things that they're talking about and putting a compelling story together, particularly in those areas where, we don't have that hard data to support it, but it ties into like culturally, this is the right thing to do for us. Where the trends are looking like, while the data isn't there to absolutely back it up, we can see where this is going, right?
Yeah.
And I think those are the instances when we know their goals and culturally what they're trying to do or not do, that's where those storytellings and using things in their terms just carry so much weight.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Well said.
And being able to tie it into the pain points that you've already heard and say, these are the things that you're telling us are really restricting your ability to perform or attain the goals you've said. These are the ways that we can support. These are the ways that we can help mitigate those issues. And this is the data to back it up. The data is king for sure. And being able to come to the table with hard numbers is, it's not always possible, but in certain instances, especially around, my area's compensation and benefits. So it's all about numbers, and we have a lot of, ROI is definitely something that we're able to provide for, adding on new benefits and how we can track that ROI down to the bottom line, especially since we happen to be self-insured. Being able to reduce our overall medical costs actually really does hit our bottom line. So data is like the key driver and the winner of the argument, right? Or
yeah, for sure. There are a few things that I got from this exchange. And first of all, data's king. Absolutely. But it's that connection with the business and really understanding the business and being that true partner that we all are for our leaders. So moving on to the next question in relation to the future of work and personal leadership qualities. What do you believe are the most important, either for yourself to develop to remain effective and visionary? Or I would even go on further to say, what are the leadership qualities as we evolve how we work?
Yeah, sure. I think it's important to be well-rounded. I know we all have our strengths, and some people are introverted, some people are extroverted, some people are really mired in the data while others are more going on feeling. But I think you can't put aside emotional intelligence. You can't put aside a understanding of the business and understanding of the business goals and strategy. So I think, the farther you go, the more those things are expected of you. And I think emotional intelligence and empathy and self-awareness are really critical the farther up you go. And you know that if you've seen it where it's lacking, definitely, and especially on the people side, we sometimes find ourselves playing cleanup where it's lacking or trying to correct those situations. But I think that that's something good that has really come out of the last decade is, at least in the research that I've seen, is the heavy emphasis on those abilities and resiliency. I know we'll talk about that, but I think you probably are going to be stalled over and over again if you don't develop that resiliency and that ability to take hits along the way and put them in perspective and keep moving forward. Something I look at myself, and I know that earlier in my career, I certainly did not have that yet, where everything seemed like a much bigger deal. And that was something, my own emotional maturity that I had to tackle to try to take on the bigger picture and the bigger tasks. And I was speaking with a colleague a couple of weeks ago who is earlier in their career, and they were saying sort of like, how do you manage the stress of your role? And I said, something, the stakes are higher in what I'm doing now, but it's actually, I felt the stress more when I was earlier in my career because I didn't have that perspective that I've gained. So for myself, I do look for that in others because I really see how it impacted me when I had not yet developed that.
Yeah, I had a very similar conversation with a colleague recently as well too, newer in her career, and it's amazing. I could see myself in her when I was, starting out, and feel like you that it takes the bumps and the scrapes to be able to get to that point, but that point where you can just be neutral about what's happening around us. I wish we could bottle it and bottle it for our new career folks, right?
Get there an easier way, right?
Exactly. Anyone else with a comment on the leadership, please?
I was listening to a podcast over the holidays, and it really struck home with me, and I shared one of the metaphors from that podcast with my team. Because, like everyone else, we're understaffed. Everybody's got a million balls in the air. We're dealing with, people who are going out on leaves and pay and things that are really important to people. And, it can feel like everything that gets thrown at you every day is super, super important. But this metaphor was, we all have these balls in the air, but most of them are rubber and will bounce if you let them drop. There are a few that are glass that you have to catch. So is this ball rubber or is this ball glass? And, and helping them to think through, like, really, if you don't answer that email today, is the world going to come crashing to an end, or are they just going to hear back from you, 12 hours later? And, is that, what's really the impact of you not acting on that thing right now, as opposed to putting it in the bucket with things that you will address at a specific time, as opposed to what's really burning, what's really an issue right now. And I think that really helped the team kind of like, oh, okay, yes, most of my tasks are rubber balls. They're not glass balls. So let me try to think of it, kind of categorize these things. And it was a mind shift for my team, and I think it really helped. It helped me, and I think it helped them as well. And now
I'm definitely writing that one down, Mandy.
Right?
Oh my God. That's a note. But I will say, like, I can't stand the number ticking up on the email. I have to answer the email. So it just drives me nuts. But I love that metaphor. That's fantastic.
That is amazing. Rubber versus glass. I love it. Anyone else? No. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question because time is ticking away. This is amazing. We could do this forever, I think. Kind of ties into what we were just chatting about, but fostering a growth mindset, either for ourselves or for our team members. Any best tips to ensure that we have we have our team members in a way of continuously growing and adapting their mindset so that they're always open to the challenges and opportunities ahead.
Janine, I would love to take this one.
Mm-hmm.
So at Loyola, which is a Jesuit institution, we really lean into those Jesuit roots and our core values. And here, we're in the education business. So we're looking to create a culture of learning and growing. And, it's obvious that we encourage and really facilitate that with our student base, but we really, with our values and with our new strategic plan, we're really doubling down on that for our workforce as well. So we see that in some of our values, like constant challenge to improve, and then we lean into those values to really just showcase that in all the ways in which we do that. So we see it in things like discussions and conversations. One of Loyola's mottos is strong truths well lived, and we love talking about that, whether it's facilitating a hard conversation or that vulnerability and transparency, especially in this current political climate of, hard conversations that we often have to have. When we lean back on that motto of we're not going to shy away from the hard stuff because there's good business lessons to learn in this too. So we really promote things like shared governance and discussion and conversations. And another one of our values is integrity and honesty, which I think just fits right in with that. But the one that excites me the most when I think of this ties right back to that Jesuit heritage. And it's one of our values is discernment. And for anyone that doesn't regularly use that word, think of just self-reflection. So here we use a tool called the Examine, which certainly has some religious attributes to it. But for those that aren't religious or certainly aren't Catholic, you could even think of it like a good old middle school Dear Diary, right? It's just that chance to sit back and do like an after action review on yourself on a really daily basis. So we pull that we'll do, midday Examine discussions. We do it after big projects, hard conversations, losses on campus. We use this a lot as a tool. And we've really emphasized the intentional act of reflection, regardless, again, of religious beliefs. We even have a walking pocket Examine, that employees can kind of print out and put in their wallets and take with them. So I love that all of these things that are, rooted in our core values and our heritage have just kind of become the foundation of what we've done to just kind of keep that growth mindset of sharing and discussing and challenging ideas, all those things that make higher education great. We're just re-emphasizing all of those and working them in with our workforce.
That's awesome.
The self-reflection piece as a team.
Yeah.
How cool. How cool. Mandy, did you have something to add on that?
No, I just think that that is super awesome, and we do things a little bit differently at WCS. We don't have such a it's not a religious-based organization, but our HR team is really built on having weekly meetings, right? I have a weekly check-in with each of my direct reports. I have a weekly check-in with my manager. And it's a time to kind of tick off the whatever, tactical things are happening, but also to have that regular check-in with like, this, I need your advice on, this situation that I'm encountering, or, we finished this big project and how can we do it better the next time, or what lessons learned do we have for the next initiative that we're going to be starting, or what does the timeline look like for the rest of the year? Those, just to have those regular conversations every week, so that the end of the year performance review is kind of a non-event.
Exactly. Yeah.
We really we try to instill that across the organization, but I don't know how well it's to some, we're getting better, but at least within HR, I think we're doing a good job of having those regular conversations and being able to provide that safe space to have a conversation with your manager and to be very open and honest, and in the spirit of constant improvement. right? It's not a like you messed this up and so we're going to fix it. It's, how can we make it better next time?
Mhm, mhm. And it's ingraining that as it's part of the DNA, part of who we are as we operate versus, a checkbox exercise or what have you. Yeah. Thoughts, Christina?
One of the things that we do, it's sort of arising out of that need to build the relationships and build inclusion, but I think it really fosters a growth mindset, and that's encouraging collaboration and mixing up who you're working with on different projects and kind of pulling people in to partner on different projects and finding those opportunities. We have a large scale project going on right now that's we're moving over to a new EMR, and in the healthcare world, that's all the medical records, but it's also our scheduling, and a lot of our employee data is in there. It kind of touches on everything, billing, and so it's this team of people from different departments that are many of them are quite senior. And I've plugged a number of people from the HR team in there, just to kind of be our eyes and ears on different things. And they're building relationships now with these more senior people and getting insights into, the struggles on the finance department that, helps them contextualize a lot of things that have gone on and things like that. So they're also opening up their eyes to different potential career paths or opportunities. And I'm getting really positive feedback on that. Initially, it was like, we don't have time to be on that project, but now it's almost a point of jealousy of the people who are on the project because they're so excited and so plugged in on all of these critical initiatives that are going on right now. So that's kind of fun to watch.
Wow, talk about growth mindset and action.
Yeah, kind of, necessity is the mother of invention, right? I needed people to do the work anyway. And then I was like, well, this could be, I can't necessarily give them more XYZ right now. We're in cost cutting mode, and we're also similarly unsure of what, whether, certain entitlements might be cut in the coming budgets, and with the federal government, and all of healthcare is contingent on that money. So really trying to be very conservative right now, but some of these things don't cost anything, right?
Yeah, for sure. Ryan, any thoughts from your side?
So many. Completely agree with everyone. As a graduate of a Jesuit university, Christy, what you shared resonates certainly from my educational experience and the values of the university. We talk a lot here about be curious, right? So keeping that open mindset, ask questions from a place of curiosity, not judgment, so that you can continue to learn. And it helps people, right? If you're curious and you're asking questions, it helps them to think through their talk track, how to tell a strong story, as we were talking about earlier. So I think all those things, certainly are important and impactful. From a practice perspective, I would share one thing. We were talking about reflective practice. We start every meeting with a reflection. And so that reflection can be a quote, right? It can be a video, it can be a folk story. It's kind of whatever if you've been selected to share a reflection, whatever you want it to be. But there's usually there's some meaning to it. And it allows everyone, one, to pause before the meeting starts and kind of center yourself and get focused. But it opens up incredible conversation, right? And allows people to be vulnerable, share stories, share experiences, and kind of help continue to push that growth mindset. So that's a practice that we've been doing for a few years here. It came from a prior organization I was at, and I think everyone really has embraced it. They like that moment with each other.
I know I'm going to do it from you.
I was just about to say that.
Rubber
Christy,
balls, glass
great
balls,
gem.
reflections. We're all walking away with something.
Oh my gosh, we're walking away with such amazing things to move on with. So we are near the end. So I am going to ask this question to all of you, and I'm going to ask you to be advice givers. So for our audience today, what are some pieces of advice that you would give in light of, challenges they may be facing, a charged environment? How can they help themselves with their own resilience and balancing the challenges of HR and their personal life? So that question is for all of you, and I think I'll kick it off to Mandy first, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm gonna just reiterate that it is so important that you take time out for you. Find what it is that brings you joy and make sure you do it every day. It doesn't have to take a long time. The other thing that I discovered during a particularly challenging time in my work career was 5 minutes of closing your eyes and breathing changes your whole perspective. And everybody has 5 minutes. No matter how busy you are, taking that 5 minutes, it just resets your brain. It allows your, not to go into too much of the science, but it takes things away from the fight or flight and into the normal operating mode, and allows you to kind of have a perspective on rubber balls versus glass balls, right?
Love that.
Yeah.
Christy.
I think we all know this from budgeting, right? Like if there's things you have to pay, you build those into your budget first, you prioritize. And I think dealing with your time and your calendar is no different. Figure out what the thing is that you're saying you prioritize and start there. Everything else will fit into that calendar, but we all know what happens when you get to the end and it's the whatever's left. That's when, as Brian was talking about, like setting boundaries, that's when you find you haven't had lunch in so long, you forgot what a lunch break looks like, right? So if that's the thing you prioritize, you block it off on your calendar and everything else will work around it, whether it's that vacation or, weekends free for your family and friends, whatever those things are, you prioritize them and you put those into your calendar first, and then everything else works itself out.
Those are your glass balls.
Yes.
Those are the glass balls.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
And on that note of not letting them drop, then once they're on your calendar, you have to be ruthless about keeping them on your calendar. It's, there's a crisis. Well, I can move that around. I can, that's just me time. So that's the first to come off. And I fall, I've been guilty of this more times than I can count. And I always regret it, especially if I didn't go to that webinar, or I didn't go to that, that personal growth thing, or the 5 minutes. For me, it's gratitude. I have to focus on gratitude. That's what makes my mindset shift. It's not that I have this huge problem and what am I going to do? It's I get to have a hard job. I get to have people relying on me and trusting me to do the right thing here. And that's how my brain works, so I have to make time to do that, to kind of change my perspective and get back to that place of positivity sometimes.
Wonderful. Brian.
Yeah, in the sense of personal growth, I mean, for me, I say step into unfamiliar spaces. Like challenge yourself to do the things that you would otherwise avoid. And if an opportunity presents itself and your first reaction is like, maybe not, say yes. Like you just push yourself. Maybe it's speaking on a webinar with people that you just met and that you're now going to be lifelong friends with, is speaking at a conference, whatever the opportunity is. Speak at a staff meeting for a function that you just don't know. Step into an unfamiliar space, challenge yourself, learn something new. You'd be surprised what you're capable of. And I know that's a lesson I've had to, remind myself of over the last year or so. But one that's also been extremely gratifying.
Wonderful. Well, I'll close with a piece of advice on my side as well too. Like all of you, put yourself first in many instances. You wouldn't think twice about canceling a meeting with your CEO. So why would you cancel a self-care activity with yourself when you know that it's going to, just do what needs to be done for yourself and help you feel better, because in the end you'll be even more productive. You'll have even more innovative ideas, and you definitely will be a role model for your team and for the organization you represent. So I just want to give a big thanks to all of you, Christina, Christy, Mandy, Brian, my new best friends. Love it. And it's been a lot of fun doing this panel with you. And thanks to Connects for inviting us all. So have a great day.